Ashvahi Shalay Halak, but Sas Vishoy move there. Hatoim Loyama, Moshe Lights and Loyosha. Keep me Saras, Adonai Chepsai, Sarasa Yagayam, and Walaila. Boy, Kate Shosla, Palge Moyim, Ashapia Yitain Vitai, or like Loyibo, Bakhalasha Yasa Yatslia, Loykhana Rishoim, Kim Kamaisa Shetit Vanarua, Alkain Loyakum Rishoim, Vanishba, Hatoim Badas Sadikim. Good day, my dear Sadiq, over there for showing time. Everybody's over here to pay a couple of Achron to Chaim Simcha ben Nachum Yehuda ben Nachum Yehuda. Chaim Simcha ben Nachum Yehuda, Chaim Beaver. And there are a number of limitations. First of all, this time in between Yontiv and Rosh Chodesh, we're not really allowed to say Hespeda. Talk a little bit. Moshe is going to talk in a minute about Chaim, some recollections, some memories, but it's not a time where we're allowed to be masked. So I too will begin. We'll begin with the story. We have to be very brief because the airlines, until everything is taken care of, all the requirements to be able to bring Chaim to Eretz Yisrael takes time. But Chaim wanted to be in Eretz Yisrael. He wanted to be in Eretz Yisrael, and Chaim will bring all of us in good health to be able to see him over there, and to be together, and to be Zechah for Tchias HaMesim. Chaim Simcha was an Ish Gibor. I'm sure that most of you remember him from before the time of the illness. And if you ever had the zchus to shake his hand, you still are hurting. So I was like, every Shabbos when he was by us shul, he sat right in the front, and he didn't just shake your hand. It was like a lulav. It was like a lulav, and he gave you that look in the eyes, that penetrating look in the eyes that he was telling you how much he cared for you, how much he loved you. It wasn't just shaking your hand. You know, people do that in a very casual way. There was a great tzaddik years ago. Some of you heard of him. His name is Reb David Lelever. Reb David Lelever, Schusi Elaine. He was a student of the Chayzim Lublin. And the Chayzim Lublin used to say that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a new Masechta. You know, we have all the Gemaras, all the Masechtas. There's going to be a new Masechta that's going to be revealed. It's called Maseches Reb David Lelever. So, what was unique about this Reb David Lelever, I think, is something that Chaim Simcha that speaks about who Chaim Simcha was. A shtik Ahavas Yisrael, a Jew who was in love with the Jewish people, a Jew who was madly in love with Am Yisrael, madly in love with his family. Everything he did heartsick. So there's a story about Reb David Lelever, and I just thought of this, and it reminded me of Chaim. That Reb David Lelever was sitting in Lublin in the Beis HaMedrash, and there was all of a sudden, he was just learning, he came to visit his Rebbe, and he was in Lublin, and he was sitting there in the corner of the Beis HaMedrash, and there was a very important looking person, looked like a Talmid Chacham, that walked into the Beis HaMedrash, and he turned around and he said, Rabbi Isaac, can anybody help me? I need to have a letter delivered to Pietrikov. In those days, before there was mail, so you would find somebody that was going in that direction, and he said, is there anybody that's heading towards Pietrikov? And there was one Jew in the Beis HaMedrash, Reb David Lelever, who said, it happens that I have to go. I'm going back. I live in Lelev, and I'm on the way. Lelev, we are on the way. We go. It's not far from Pietrikov, and I'll be happy to drop the letter off. And this person said, I'd appreciate it because I'm the Rav of Pietrikov, and I have to be here in Lublin longer than I expected. And I'm worried that my wife and family should know that I'm okay. So David Lelev said, I'm happy to do that. So Reb David Lelev accepted upon himself to deliver this letter. Now it happens that this Rav of Pietrikov had 10 children. And they were beautiful, beautiful children, but the oldest daughter was 17, and Rachmana litzlan, she was handicapped. She was unable to walk. And because they were so poor in those years, they didn't have wheelchairs, and only very rich people had the ability to get around a little bit if they were handicapped. And she was very sick and she couldn't move at all. And it turns out that the Rav of Pietrikov, he had to stay extra. He had to stay in Lublin much longer than a month. And finally he made his way back to Pietrikov. And when he came to the house, he couldn't believe his eyes. When he came to his house, the children came running, Abba, Daddy, Tati, they came running there. And that daughter who couldn't walk was running and jumped into his arms. And he started to cry. She didn't walk. Since she's a tiny little kid, she hasn't been able to walk. She was sick. And he asked, what happened? How are you able to walk? And he was so excited. He was crying. And the children gathered around and they said this. They said that some time ago, around a little bit more than a month ago, it was already late at night and there was a knock on the door. And a very strange person was at the door. On the one hand, he was wearing very simple clothing like a regular person, but his eyes, his face was shining. There was something different. There was something very different about him. And he came in and he was so excited, he started to count the children. He said, Hayeshia, he said, Es, Amechu, Avarech, Es, Nachal, and he said, can I know there are 9 children? And they all said, but actually there's a 10th, but she can't walk. She's in the room, she's not able to walk. And they said that this person, they didn't know who he was. He just got up and he went to the room. And the girl saying, he came over where I was in bed, and he stared at me, he looked at me, his eyes were filled with such love. And he said, what's the matter? And she said, I haven't been able to walk since I'm a little child. He said, I give you a bracha. You should be able to walk and run and jump and play and to go under the chuppah, to run under your chuppah. You should be healthy till 120. And she said to her father, I promise you that the moment that this person left, I felt something changing inside of me. And he gave me my life back. And ever since he left, I don't know who that person was, but ever since he left, I've been able to walk and to run. You know, there are certain people in the world, that when you feel like you can't move, when you feel that you're broken, when you feel that you have no hope, and then there are those few people in the world that they don't have to really say anything. Chaim wasn't making speeches. I'm the one that makes a lot of speeches. Chaim wasn't a man of many words, at least that I knew of. He was a man, I guess there are some others that are different, but Chaim was a person of tremendous conviction, of tremendous action, of tremendous caring, of tremendous love. And all I know is that when I stepped into his Dalet Amos, when I looked in his eyes, so there was something that lifted off of me as well. And it's that love that he radiated, that he gave to the family, that devotion to Am Yisrael. He was able to bench lulav, am I correct? He was able to bench lulav, his love for Yiddishkeit. When I went to see him some time ago, he was in the nursing, in the rehab at that time. So I thought that maybe it would be more of a Hasidic handshake, you know. It would be more of a light handshake. It was the same grip, the Chaim grip, and the same look, even though he was deteriorating very badly. It was that same powerful Gibor. That powerful Gibor was on fire with Ahavas Yisrael, on fire with Yiddishkeit, and fire with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, when I was talking to Moshe, I said that, and to Yitzchak the Stew, there's no question that his return to Eretz Yisrael, to the place that he loved, that his return to Eretz Yisrael, especially at a difficult time like this, that Gibor is going to fight, he's going to do what he has to do. And he's going to be back to the person he was 30, 40 years ago, the fire that he was. And hopefully he'll be a Melitz Yosha Guta Beiter for the whole family, full of Am Yisrael. Until that time, we'll be able to join him and to be zocheh to see him again, tall and straight, the way that we remember him. By Tkiyas HaMesim should be B'Karv Mamish, Moshe's Mesim.
One. As Rebbe said, it's no hispedim, it's only stories. So we tell stories about Chaim Simcha, Reb Nachum Yehuda, and Shendel, his Saba, Zaidi, Dad, Chaim. And I ask Mechila if I'm not telling the stories right, or if I leave something out, or I say too much, then please, I ask Mechila. I hope directionally it's correct. This, when Bobby condemned me asked me this morning to do this, there wasn't enough time to work out, so I started quickly crawling around and just get some stories besides the ones that we know internally in the family. So I think everybody knows, but as an 18-year-old, Chaim pretended to go to summer camp, and he with Beitar, and he wrote postcards that he had prepared and that were sent from different places back to his mother, who had no idea that he had enlisted at the time with the Irgun and gone secretly to Eretz Yisrael to fight there. Mother didn't know where he was, and as I was hearing all these stories, there were really two themes that came out besides the Ahavas for Bnei Yisrael, for all Jews that Chaim had, Zaidi had. And it's really, he lived this way in the life of the spheres, in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu pours his light into the world. And the two spheres that most embody who he was were Chesed and Gvura. Chesed is the overabiding love, overarching love for all Jews, for the land of Eretz Yisrael, and Gevura, the very, very great strength that all of us have experienced. So he was in Eretz Yisrael, and Stevie told me earlier that I didn't know what he was doing in Eretz Yisrael, but apparently he and a group of 5 others or 4 others were in a cell, in a self-contained cell. One cell didn't know what the other cell was doing, and they were robbing banks. And they were robbing banks to fund the activities that were required to be funded. And there was apparently one particular bank that was the preferred bank to be robbed, and that was Barclays Bank. At the One Israel Fund dinner where Chaim and Bobby were honored, they asked, why was it in particular that you were robbing Barclays Bank? And the answer was, because they were insured, so they could get their money back. All the kids that have lived in the house know that from the earliest years, whenever Jewish kids were in trouble, everywhere, anywhere, the place to go to find a home was with Saba and Savta, with Bobby and Zaidi, Chaim and Selma. And Selma instructed me, there were many kids that came through the house and that lived for quite a while in the house. Bobby said, Selma said, Savta said, not to give any names, so I won't, because not to hurt anybody or insult anybody. But when I was in the hospital Wednesday night, one of those was there, and that person said to me that my mother said to me that Chaim and Selma would even take in a stray dog, so I guess I'm a stray dog. But that person said they saved my life, and without them I wouldn't be here where I am today. Chaim Zaidi worked with the JDL and Rav Meir Kahana, and it's well documented. And once Chaim and Rav Kahana Zatzal went to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe to encourage him and to try to bring him to help support the efforts in releasing and freeing Russian Jewry. And the Rebbe responded to them that the JDL, with its own efforts, will bring thousands upon thousands of Jews out of Russia, but the Rebbe is sending people into Russia so that those Jews that are going to come out are going to have bris milah, they're going to know what matzah is, that they're going to have mitzvahs to take, that they can carry with them either to Eretz Yisrael or to the United States. In the late 60s, so that was chesed mixed with gvura. In the late 60s, there were a lot of incidents and problems with hooligans desecrating Jewish graves, threatening Jewish schools, principals, and there are, in very well documented stories that Chaim, who is always referred to as the leader of the group, of immense of incredible strength and gvura, was the one who took a small number of JDL compadres, cohorts, to certain, once to a cemetery, the Montefiore Cemetery, where there was probably about 150 hooligans that had assembled to try to desecrate the cemetery, and they saw the small group of I have to guess well-armed JDL folks standing there inside the cemetery, and they just quietly turned around and left. There was a school principal, a Rosh Yeshiva of a high school in Brooklyn, who had been threatened with death threats by similar hooligans. So Chaim and a dozen or so JDL fellows showed up, and the group rushed them, and Chaim, apparently with his very good grip, got hold of the leader of that group and basically grabbed him by the throat and said, okay, something along the lines of, what are you going to do now? And they just left, and there must be hundreds if not thousands of stories like that. And that's Gevura. He and his brother Ralph Alav Shalom once decided to show off the Gevura, and I think between the two of them they took a Volkswagen Beetle and just lifted it over their heads. That was before when they were still built well, so you could actually do that. There's a story that Chaim was driving. He always liked to drive with his arm, I think, out of the window. And there was somebody who on Mott Avenue tried to mug him, so grabbed his arm. So Chaim took the arm, dragged it inside the car, and started driving off, and basically dragged the would-be mugger several blocks and then just dropped him on the floor. There are stories told, I've experienced one of those myself, about Chaim's reactions to when his daughters started bringing home potential boyfriends, husbands to date. So Amy tells me that before dating, before going to Eretz Yisrael, whenever she wanted to date anybody, she warned all the boys that when we come to the house, my father, Chaim, is going to ask me, he's going to ask you whether you sing Zmiras at the Shabbos table. It makes no difference whether you do or not, just say yes. Shelley said that when she brought guys home, then they had to show their license, they had to show their registration, and then Chaim would walk around the car and kick all four tires to make sure that the car was drive-worthy. One of the first times that I met Chaim and Selma, I made a mistake. We were sitting in the living room, and I was sitting next to Amy, and I said something, and I sort of went, come on, and I sort of smacked her on the leg. And I knew I had made a mistake because I looked up and Zadie's right eyebrow just went up. He gave me a death stare. I thought I might not survive that encounter, but this is talking to me. So what am I supposed to do? It's talking. Okay. There was one of the first gifts that we got, that Amy and I got as a present, as an engagement present, was an electric drill, a corded drill, which was a fantastic engagement present for both of us. And was shortly after we were married, Chaim needed to build a folding table. He had procured this huge slab of wood, and he had also gone out and bought the metal frame to match it. And he taught me how to use a drill. Now, those who are close to our family know that I like to dabble in woodworking, and I actually have quite a nice workshop. So it's in the schus of Toby Alei Shalom and Zadie that a lot of the stuff that I learned a lot from him just in woodworking.
I still have that table.
You still have that table?
Yes, it's in my garage.
But hang on a second. There was one time when you got very angry, and he with his very great strength, pounded the table to such a degree that the legs just started buckling. So he was very
It's
strong.
by 6 inches on one side.
Yeah. Rivki was telling me that the nurses gave her a sheet over Shabbos, this past Shabbos, to cover herself because she was cold. And she was reminded that when she was much younger, that Saba was davening, when he was davening in the house, he would wrap his talus around himself, and then she would be standing on the inside, and she felt such a security and degree of safety and being cared for and loved for. When Eitan and Micha were little, they used to spend Shabbos with Saba and Savta, playing Uno with them. Now, there was always very different outcomes how they played. When they played with Savta, they always won. When they played with Saba, they never won. And another story of David was picked up by Zaidi on his way home from school. He, took him home. There was nobody, it needed to work out that way. So he picked them up from school, and then they went home, and then they watched The Lion King together. This went on apparently for a year or two. So one time, Zaidi was vacuumed while David was watching The Lion King, and the vacuum stopped. So Zaidi started looking around what happened. So David was sitting in the other room, and the vacuum was too loud, so he had unplugged the vacuum. But it came out much later that somebody asked Zaidi once, why were you always watching The Lion King with David? So Zaidi said it's the movie that he wanted to watch, and so we put that movie on. At a different time, somebody maybe later asked David, why is it that you always wanted to watch The Lion King? And David said, well, it's the only movie that Zaidi would possibly watch, so that's why we had to watch that. He loved all Jews. He loved his whole mishpacha. He loved everybody. And Shelley was saying, and Rivki was saying that that's his devotion, his love for every Jew and everybody. All of us, we're learning that from him because we saw that. Robert Noble was pointing out that Zaidi was davening the last 6 or 7 years in the yeshiva of the yeshiva Gdola of the 5 towns in Far Rockaway. And Rabbi Noble said that the Avreichim and the Rebbeim took tremendous chizuk from the way that he conducted himself. He would be among the first ones there. He davened silently through Yishtabach, up to Yishtabach, Psukkah Dezirah through Yishtabach, before most people ever got out of bed. So the problem was then that he wouldn't talk anymore to you. And so he would be sitting at our kitchen table, at anybody's kitchen table, his own kitchen table. You want to communicate. Nothing would happen. So the slightly unfortunate result was that one time he was going to the Island Shul, the Island Avenue Shul for Shacharis morning davening, and he had at that point he had a scooter. It was the Israeli Institute of Halachic something or other measures. Tzomeh, thank you. Tzomeh, the approved scooter, and you were able to use that on Shabbos. So then Yehuda Leibowitz went to Shul to find out where Zaidi was, had he gotten there safely, and he found the scooter on the side of the road. It was just tipped over, and there was no Zaidi. And as he, nobody had any idea where he was, and Zaidi couldn't just sort of pick himself up and walk over, run away. So he looked where that was, and so he found Zaidi's legs sticking out from a bush. So I guess they eventually picked him up, and somebody said to Zaidi, well, why didn't you call for help? He said, couldn't talk. Zaidi changed hundreds of years worth of Shabbos Nigun and Zmiris tradition. In Yom Zeh B'Chubad, we didn't know that there was an extra Oy Lamed! All the families where he spent all his life, or various other things that he did. This past Rosh Hashanah, Baruch Hashem, we were able to give Zaidi a really good send-off present, in that we davened on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. We davened starting from Tkiyah Shofar all the way through Musaf. There was a minyan of his Bnei Mishpacha. Every Mishpacha was represented. Every Mishpacha had somebody there, and we davened the full Musaf through him, all the way to the end. It was beautiful. It says in Tehillim, Mi ya'aleh b'hava Hashem u'mi yakum b'mkom kodsho. I wrote it wrong. Asher lo nasa lashab nafshi. Usually we translate that as somebody who didn't swear falsely by my name. As I heard this story from Rebbe many years ago. It left a huge impression. But you can also translate Asher lo nasa lashab nafshi, who didn't carry my soul in vain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us an empty vessel, a neshama which is beautiful, clean and tahor, into this world as an investment, and he expects that after 120, give it back to him, full with mitzvahs, full with ahavas, Eretz Yisrael, full with ahavas, Ben Adam the Chavei, full with ahavas of Jews, full with love, filled with mitzvahs. I'm made in front of everybody with neshama tahora that's going back to Shamayim. Is on his way back already, on his way to Eretz Yisrael, is mole mitzvahs, overflowing. It was one of a lifetime investment that the Ribbon Shalom had. On behalf of myself and all of us, I'm asking Chaim Simcha ben Menachem Yehuda from Mechila for everything that we should have done and didn't, and everything that we shouldn't have done and said and did. And he should be made at Yosha. Now, Micha, Till.
David Adonai Agordo Elecha Yishkem Behar Kodshecha Veileichtam Yimufoel Sedek V'Toiver Emet Bildovo V'Rogo Al L'Shaino Lo Aso L'Rehu Lo D'Cherpa Lo Nasa Al Krovo Nivzeh B'Einov Imas V'Esrei Adonai Yechaver Yishma L'Hara V'Lo Yamri V'Esmoi Lo Nasa V'Neshech V'Sheichar Anoki Lo Naka V'Yisei L'Lo Yimot Obviously, the verse going to be saying Tess Zion.
כתב לדוד, שמרני כי חסיתי בך. אמרת לאדוני, אדוני אתה טובתי בא עליך. לקדושים אשר בארץ אימה ואדירי כל חפצי בם. ירבו אצבעותם אחר, מהרו בעל השיח, נצחיהם מדם ובעל לשאת שמותיהם על שפתיי. אדוני מנת חלקי וכוס יתה תומית גורלי.